Fiona Cuthbertson coming from the pod to record Off the Cuff. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by Ian Paisley Jr for this election special. Ian is the youngest child of two DUP grandees, the Right Honourable Lord Bandside, otherwise known as Ian Paisley, former DUP leader, and his wife Eileen Paisley, Baroness Paisley of St George's. Growing up in a highly political household, it is no surprise that he completed a Masters in Irish politics before being selected to the Northern Ireland Forum, the Northern Ireland Assembly, a member of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, and most recently as DUP MP for North Antrim, a seat that he won in 2010 and is contesting on the 4th of July 2024. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Fiona.
Thank you very much. So, as I said in my introduction, you've come from a very political family. What is it like growing up at the heart of Northern Ireland politics?
First and foremost, my dad had several jobs. He always saw himself as a pastor. So he was pastor of a church, and we grew up in Amance. The fact that he did politics on the side and did it on Europe, Northern Ireland, and did it in the United Kingdom, so happened that that's what he did as well. But by and large, it was very much I grew up in a pastor's house. And I think that gave me a very good insight into compassion for people's needs and to caring for people's needs, people who needed pastoral care, people who needed witness to, people who needed support in the most troubled time of their lives. And I saw my dad carrying that pastorship through not just his ministerial career, but into then his political career, where he really saw himself as a shepherd of his flock. And if that was a political flock, at times more than a religious flock, so be it. So it was like as a kid, as I got more engaged in politics myself and caught the disease of wanting to do politics, it was a huge privilege because I really had a front row seat and an apprenticeship with someone who was probably one of the greatest politicians on these islands and across these islands for decades. And to have that privilege of that background stayed me in good stead for my own political adventure and career.
And can you tell us a bit about your political journey?
You summed it up, and you can put it into a few sentences. Got elected first in 1996, gosh, so long ago, to the Forum, and then to the Northern Ireland Assembly, which was essentially Northern Ireland's Parliament. I was there for 13 years or thereabouts, and then getting elected to Parliament, which was really my dream. It was the thing I always wanted to do from when I was a kid. When I first was taken to Parliament as a little child by my parents and saw the place in action, it was kind of one of those moments where you take your child to work day, but taking your child to Parliament those days was like taking them in around 10 or 11 o'clock at night and sitting there for an all-night debate. And there was my brother and me. I have a twin brother, and we would be sitting in this amazing palace of Westminster and seeing members of Parliament. I mean, great beasts of their day, whether it was Margaret Thatcher or Jim Callaghan or people like that, plying their political career and their political trade. When I got to watch my dad, it was like sitting in a front row of a boxing ring, seeing this great man wrestle with the issues that he wanted to wrestle with and getting that front row view of all the moves that he was pulling and all the things that he was doing. And my own journey was very much, I wanted to do that. And then as you get older, you realize politics isn't about the scene stuff. It's about a lot of the on-scene stuff. And it's about having something to do in your community. Are the things you want to change? Are the things you want to improve? Are the things that we need to hold on to? Or how we can campaign to support things that are already there? An awakening came to me when I was a student at Queen's University. The hunger strikes had just about ended. There was a lot of protesting at Queen's University, and I got very active in student politics. And a person in my class, in my year, Maria Farrell, was a member of the IRA. And she decided with some of her colleagues to go to Gibraltar, and they were shot by the SAS on a mission in Gibraltar. And that sparked off this whole protest at university. And I remember coming through the university during those weeks. It was very hot and heavy. And IRA supporters had all these black flags that were marching around the university in black flags. And I decided as a student politician, as someone on the Students' Council, I would protest against those things. So we ran a counter demonstration because she was a terrorist. She was doing what was wrong. And we were students. We should have been enlightened, not in that field of wanting to support terrorism. Remember walking through university that day in my biker's jacket and my long hair, and this man jumped out and said, I want to interview you. Who are you? I said, well, I'm a student politician. What's your name? Ian Paisley. He says, I don't believe you. And the guy actually he did then ultimately believe who I was. And I remember then doing my first interview for the BBC for a chap called Mark Davenport. And Mark became Northern Ireland's top political editor for the BBC. And he says that was the first interview he actually ever did in Belfast was
Oh,
with me.
wow.
And it was my first interview with a BBC journalist. And that's how I really got engaged in my party. Became very active, putting up posters, putting leaflets out, being a really active member of my branch. And eventually they asked me in a selection meeting, yeah, we'd like you to run for office. And I think I demonstrated from that point onwards that I really want to be engaged in the political race.
And what's been the highlight of your career so far?
Getting elected to Parliament has to be a highlight of anyone's political career. It's the mother of parliaments. It's the most amazing place to represent your community, to be a voice for voiceless people, and to be able to say, as a member of Parliament, I can help my community, passport them through issues, and get solutions for them. I'm very much a grassroots politician. I very much work for my community. And all of the stuff of speaking in Parliament or being on television or going to nice events, it, to me, is just a cherry on top. The real work is representing my community and helping them and achieving results. One of the things that I was able to do in 2019, one of our major factories was about to close. And through my contacts, just made as a member of Parliament, I was able to attract a very significant British businessman to come in and to buy the company, to reinvest in it and turn it from 49 people to today 2,000 people. And the factory, that's the Right Bus Company. It's owned by Joe Bamford. And I personally am responsible for doing that. And he has said so. He said, Ian, I wouldn't have invested in Northern Ireland, let alone in Ballymena, if you hadn't have met me that day and convinced me to do it. And I remember I took about a week twisting his arm, persuading him to come to the place to see it and to see that result today and to walk through the town that could have been decimated by unemployment, to see a town that's thriving as a manufacturing hub and is the hub for hydrogen development in our country and on this island. I feel very proud that I had some small part in persuading the British industrialist to get involved in this part of the country and to do that.
Well, it doesn't sound as if it was a small part at all, so that's amazing. And obviously, you're up for re-election. There is going to be a general election on the 4th of July, but there are several parts of the process before polling day. These include Parliament being locked up and candidates being selected and the introduction of the election spending rules. So can you tell us a bit about this as a practical perspective as a sitting MP?
Whenever you see that little box being wheeled out onto Downing Street in front of number 10, and you know, oh, the Prime Minister's going to make an announcement, I know what's coming, it can fill you with trepidation because you literally have hours to prepare your office and all the things that you've been doing in Parliament suddenly come to a shuddering halt. Business, as you know, finished within 2 days and what they call the wash-up process. A whole lot of key legislation that the government was pushing, namely, say, their big tobacco piece of legislation, came to shuddering halt, hasn't happened. And yet that was a flagship programme. But we as MPs know that within days we're out of that building. We can't use it anymore. We can't use the facility. Anything we spend on our campaign that says vote for this person is captured in your election expenditure. And your election expenditure is very limited. I mean, you cannot buy a seat in Parliament by throwing lots of money at it. Literally, in the 6 weeks that we've had for this campaign, everything that is captured in that is probably going to be less than £15,000 for most MPs or for most candidates. That's not a lot of money when you take advertising, mail slots, and putting out literature. It's a very small budget. Of course, the years before the election, you can spend an awful lot on promoting yourself. A lot of MPs don't. A lot of MPs, just through their work, they will be noticed. I try to do a mixture of hard work in the constituency for as many constituents as possible and regular mail drops and regular door knocking sessions where I'm around and about wanting to make sure that they know that I'm doing these things because we have a wee saying here, Fiona, it's eaten bread is soon forgotten. So you've got to keep reminding people that
Yeah.
but your career, you're essentially become unemployed that night. On the day of dissolution, which was what, 30 weeks ago, you're no longer allowed to use the term MP after your name. You have to put a notice on any digital devices that you have, whether you're on Twitter or X or whether you're on Instagram or Facebook, that I'm no longer the member of Parliament for, I'm now a candidate for this constituency. You have to use a form of words to describe who you are. And then you have to get on with the campaign like everyone else at an equal footing, but hopefully name recognition and work recognition comes into it and plays some part in a re-election campaign.
So you have officially been reselected, I'm assuming, therefore, and the DUP have candidates in all the seats they're hoping to select now?
We've declared all of our candidates and the campaign is being launched and will be nominated at about 10:30 a.m. officially by the electoral office. But I have been knocking doors from the day the election was called.
And talking of selections, Nigel Farage announced that he is going to stand in Clacton and that he is taken over as the new leader of Reform. So what impact do you think this will have on the election?
If Nigel gets elected, I think it will have a very significant impact on Parliament. I also think that for an election campaign, that's probably the most recorded thing was Rishi Sunak got rained on, and someone in the Labour Party has been briefing against another member of the Labour Party, namely Diane Abbott. This now maybe will inject a bit of life into the national campaign. Will Nigel or won't he be successful after 7 runs to Parliament? I actually hope he is. I think Nigel would be very good in Parliament. I think he will call things as they are. I've worked very closely with Nigel. He's a personal friend. I've known him over the years. I remember working with him on the Brexit campaign, and way in the wee hours of the morning, whenever people thought that it would never be won, I was speaking to him on the phone. He says, "Well, Ian, it looks like we probably won't make this." And I says, "Nigel, we will. I'm driving home now, and a new dawn is breaking over my country." It was a beautiful dawn morning. And I said, "In a matter of hours, we will win this campaign." And sure enough, a couple of hours later, it was declared that we had won by a very narrow majority. And Nigel rang me, says, "Do you mind if I use those words in my speech?" And I said, "Not at all." So I was very pleased to help contribute to that thought process of Nigel's. And he will be a fisher in this election. He will be a lightning bolt, and he will attract a lot of national attention because the Tories are a little tired and they need to be reinvigorated. And I'm just not sure what Labour stands for.
And talking about what people stand for, the DUP have 5 key policy areas to build a better Northern Ireland within the Union. So that's fix the NHS, help working families, grow the economy, keep our schools world class, and remove the Northern Ireland Protocol. So which of those issues are you seeing on the doorstep, or are there any other issues?
In a very local campaign, you always will get things thrown up. The terrible state of our roads, for example. Sometimes our roads are like a Swiss cheese. There's so many holes in them. And that's a very local issue, which people say, "Please fix this." And pothole politics is very important politics because it's all politics is local. And if you can help a local family or local person with an issue like that, you probably have them for life. But because the NHS in Northern Ireland is in such dire straits, I mean, it is startling, Fiona, but nearly 30% of everyone in Northern Ireland is on a health waiting list. It's staggering. Out of the 1.7 million people, these are not for serious procedures in a number of cases. It's just the system has not got the capacity. It has the money, but the money appears to be badly managed. So that is an issue which I get every day. How are we going to fix the NHS locally? If you think it's bad in Wales or bad in England or bad in Scotland, it really is in crisis here. Our working families issue is one because we want to try and get as many people into the workforce. I'm very fortunate that my Eastern Seaboard constituency is largely at full employment, at less than 3% unemployed. But that 3%, if I could get most of that into the workforce, it would help me fill about 6,000 job vacancies in my constituency. So I really need to try and see if we can help working families. If we can get them into full-time employment by supporting them with their family and with childcare, that would really help. So issues like that to help us then knock on and then grow the economy and see our economy buzzing. I just want to see this place being really successful. Northern Ireland does punch above its weight. Most of the buses on the UK roads are built in Northern Ireland. Those beautiful red double-decker buses, they're built in my constituency. Most of the taxis that are driven in London, part of their bodies are made in Northern Ireland. Stuff that we use for granite that we put into our pavements in GB, it's taken out of the ground in Kilkeel in Northern Ireland. 90% of all of the seats in airliners are built in Northern Ireland. Our pharmaceutical industry is flourishing. The food that we make on our farms feeds about 10 million people on GB. So we are a real little productive country, but we don't blow our trumpet well enough to tell people this. And sometimes we're taken for granted because we're only 2% of the UK in terms of population size. But in terms of what we do for the UK, I think it is very significant. I mean, we're 7% of the armed forces, and yet we're
Gosh.
only 2% of the population. Well, we like to fight. You know, and there is that element. So we've really got to, I think, show that Northern Ireland, with its best foot forward, is a very important, integral part of the United Kingdom and wants to continue to contribute to this nation, same way and equally our family members in England, Wales, and Scotland.
Absolutely. And this comes to my next question, which is how you're going to ensure that the DUP and the Northern Ireland Assembly work to further the aims that the DUP has with an incoming government of whatever colour that is.
Well, the biggest problem that we have had has been post-Brexit, and that the Brexit arrangement did not land well for Northern Ireland. The arrangements which Boris came to with regards to the protocol really did put a fissure between us and the rest of the UK. All of the things that I've talked about there in terms of our trading relationship, suddenly there was friction between us and our main market, principally England and Scotland. And we've been doing our best to try and have that friction removed because it's of no real advantage that our biggest market, 80% of everything we make goes to GB. When there's friction in that market, it really does hinder us. So we want to try and remove that friction and feel that the division that's been put between us and GB is removed. And that's going to be a tough call because I think Labour are of the view Brexit's done, it's over with. Tories are certainly of the view Brexit's done, let's not talk about it anymore. But we're saying this hangover has got to be addressed. I'll give you a very obvious example. I sit on a veterinary commission, and because we are such a big farming community, all of veterinary medicine in Northern Ireland after December of next year will suddenly no longer be allowed to be brought into Northern Ireland from GB. Now, given that we're feeding 10 million people and more in GB, that will damage and destroy our agricultural output. So we need that fixed, and we've got a very short window to fix it. And that's a hangover from the deals that the government cut, not getting them right on agriculture and veterinary medicines. So we need to really fix that, and I'm working hard with my colleagues to do that. But whether it's a Labour government or a Conservative government or a hung parliament, that issue is going to be top of the agenda. It needs to be fixed for us.
There's quite a battleground coming up, and all 18 seats are up for grabs, and some are going to be more competitive than others. Where do you see the other main battlegrounds for the DUP appearing?
It's not without knowledge that our former leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, has left politics under a cloud. And obviously his seat in Lagan Valley is under a significant challenge. Our current leader, Gavin Robinson, because it's a Belfast seat, very cosmopolitan seat, that too is always a challenge. But I'm confident that in those two seats we can actually win. Unionism collectively could win back a seat from the Alliance Party in North Down if they get their act together and people unite behind one of the unionist candidates. And they could, if they unite behind the one candidate in Fermanagh South Tyrone, the most westerly part of the United Kingdom, we could see a unionist, an agreed unionist candidate elected there. Now that would bring unionism, if we're able to hold our 8 to 10 members from probably 3 parties. Now that to me would be very, very positive and would be a significant gain. And it would also send out a signal that Northern Ireland is very much pro-union, but very much these issues have got to be addressed. It could go the other way. We could end up losing seats if unionism splits. The biggest problem I face is twofold. One is apathy. Oh, you'll be all right. You've got a great majority, so don't bother coming out and vote. And so your majority collapses. Or B, there's 3 or 4 other unionists in the race. I'm facing in my seat 2 other unionists who believe by and large the same thing as me. But if my vote salami slices, it could let someone from a different party like Alliance or Sinn Féin take the seat by default. So unionism has got to use this. It's got to use its head. We've got to get behind the 18 unionists in all of these constituents who can actually win, because for me, the most important issue is driven by unionism.
And looking beyond the DUP in the election, what values do you think are the most important that the government follows during the election and beyond?
I think it's got to make sure that its economic policy is sensible, that it caters for the most needy in our community, it levels people up in terms of their income and their needs, and create opportunities for entrepreneurs to grow and develop. Now, we've seen some of that, hints of that, green shoots of that in the last government, but it wasn't always brave enough. I would have hoped that the last government would be much braver with its economic policy in terms of driving growth and in terms of creating opportunities for entrepreneurs. It always kind of was ready to do it and then back down. And I just hope that the next government recognises that, look, as a country, as a kingdom, we've got to make this place flourish, and we'll only do it if we're brave and if we all pull together.
And we are lucky enough to work together on the issue of retail crime, and you have been the co-chair of the APPG on retail crime, safe and sustainable high streets through the last Parliament. And our work is having an impact, as the government have now made it an aggravated offence to physically abuse a shop worker. And the Labour Party have indicated that they would support another of our key requests to get rid of the £200 threshold should they make the next government. What else needs to be done to rid ourselves of this problem?
Well, first of all, can I say it's been a real privilege working with you on this.
Oh,
Fiona.
thank you.
All parliamentary party groups, sometimes they get a bad name, but I think our all parliamentary group has got a very good name. And first of all, it is genuinely cross-party. The needs which we're reflecting reflect every single community, from whether they're in Cornwall to whether they're in Jonah Groups, or whether they're in the west of Northern Ireland or in the far east of England and Oulton Broad or Lowestoft. These issues of shopkeepers and retail needs are very obvious. People are sick, sore, and tired of theft being reduced to shoplifting, and of people not seeing it as criminal activity that has got to be stamped out. And through the work that we have done on this committee across the parties, I think we've seen a recognition that this is serious, a recognition that police must be more on the ball on these issues, that fines must be meaningful, and that we should be able to call these criminals out and name them and shame them. And we've had some success in that. I was very, very pleased the day that we ran a very public programme in Parliament that the Prime Minister called it out and said, look, this retail crime group is doing what it's supposed to do. It's drawing attention to these matters. And he reflected on the fact that as a young man, he had worked in a retail shop, so he knows exactly what retailers face. And I think we have given a voice to those people, and we've given them hope that Parliament actually can do what it's supposed to do. It can represent people's needs and change things. I think the police respect us much more now, in that we're not seen as a nuisance, but we're now seen as a critical friend. And that group, I hope, will continue to go from strength to strength. Very successful in England and Wales. I want to see that power extended to Northern Ireland. I've already seen the Northern Ireland Assembly pick up on that issue and say this is a justice issue that we should extend to Northern Ireland also. So let's see grow that way. And I think if we do that, we'll be very, very pleasantly surprised.
That's really good news. I'm so pleased because it has been such a privilege to work with you on this as well. You've been so vocal about it. And you have also worked on issues around motorsports, which you're also very involved with the APPG of that as well. For most people, the face of motorsport is Formula One, but it is also a platform to accelerate the development of engineering solutions and help women into engineering. What do you hope the main parties say about this during the election and how they will support the industry?
Well, I hope people understand that when you join this all up, there's a golden thread that runs from primary school of getting kids to understand that the exciting stuff about motor racing is actually to do with maths and geometry and tech and computer science, and that they join it up the whole way through their school career and they want to do a university career or get into an apprenticeship that leads them into a skills base that they become super little engineers, and we start really growing our economy. Look, we're at the cutting edge of hydrogen technology as a nation. It's only because we've got industrialists leading that. We've got to keep that edge, keep that nose ahead of everyone. Why are three of the world's best Formula One teams based in a small triangle in the UK? It's because the best engineers, the best ideas, the most creativity is happening in that hub. And we have got to make sure that we can continue to drive those hubs of excellence. And the only way we'll do it is for government directing support at it, giving them help and concessions, whether it's tax breaks or whether it's direct support or whether it's creativity, encouragement, and for them just to understand that this makes a difference. This is how you make a difference. You get a spot, a sweet spot where we're better than everyone else, and then we develop it and develop it and develop it until we are the best in the world and we're untouchable. And I think Formula One, motorsport engineering, aeronautical technologies, all of those things put us right at the curve. And we've got to make sure that we stay there, because everyone else in the world, whether it's at the Far East, China, or whether it's in Middle Europe and with Germany, they want to take that crown from us. And sometimes I don't think we as a people just realize how creative a space we are in and how leaders of technology we actually are. But it can only happen if we start to understand that that needs government support.
And also, the motorsport industry helps the government plans for net zero. So, what do you hope the government might say about that over the election?
To stop playing, just lip service to it. We're at the cutting edge of it. But it's also got to be practical. You can't just say that all vehicles will end in 2030 or 2035. We've got to put in place the infrastructure that will allow for hydrogen technologies, for battery technologies, for mixed fuels to actually take that space and allow the market to choose what is best, and for the government support to be flexible enough to identify that they don't need to back just one horse here. They can back all of these techs and get us to that space of net zero faster and with more creativity than they currently probably think. But I think government always likes, our civil servants always like to play safe. And hence, it's the old saying, always buy IBM because it's safe. We've got to actually break out of that and say, well, hydrogen tech really does need support for this type of heavy industry or for this type of mechanics. Batteries needed there, other technologies and mixed fuels are needed there. We still need some of these other carbons there, and get into that space where we are flexible and recognise that it's only through that flexibility will we drive the change and drive the difference.
You mentioned earlier on that the current government have been in power for a long time, and as you said, that translates to a harder battle regarding winning the hearts and minds of the electorate. What can they do to achieve this, do you think?
Well, I think they've got to demonstrate that they are not out of ideas, that their ideas are not fanciful, that their ideas are costed, and that their ideas capture the imagination of the public. There also is the thing that, the pendulum in British politics does swing. And I think for politics to work, the other side has to think it has a chance. It can get into power as well. It can make a difference. If it doesn't think that, politics won't work. And there does come a time where there will be change, and we've got to accept that. I'm not handing this over and saying, well, it's now Labour's turn. They've got to win it. Conservative Party, I think, still does have some ideas, and we've seen that in recent days. But can those ideas get traction, and can they win the hearts and minds of people? Well, we don't have very long to wait.
And do you think social media will have an impact on the election?
Probably massively so, in that especially the younger voter tends to get their interest and their knowledge from social media now. But nothing beats old-fashioned campaigning, going around doors, talking to people, being a real human being in front of them, and knowing that you are a person that they can reach and talk to. And that's hard work, but it's worth it.
And finally, do you use social media to put your messages across? And if so, where can people go to learn more about you?
I do have an Instagram, Ian.Paisley MP. I do use frequently. It now, of course, has that banner across. I'm no longer an MP until after the election. The other thing I do have a Facebook, Ian Paisley MP. People say, Ian, you're very nice on Facebook. That's because my wife runs it for me. And very nice. And I do tend to do my local papers and my local press, and do tend to do the old-fashioned thing of calling at people's doors and talking to them, because a lot of people getting into politics think it's about notoriety and about being acknowledged. And you can be very famous outside of your own constituency, but it doesn't get you elected. You need to be famous in your constituency for doing stuff for people. And that's what I try to concentrate on.
And with that, we come to the end of this election special. And thank you so much, Ian, for giving us your insight. It is obvious that a lot can change over the next period, and it will be important for people to recognise that their vote does really count, and it will really impact the direction in which the country goes. So thank you, listeners, for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it. And obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you feel you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Have a good week, one and all.